Well, we're starting to see something more and more frequently that we were told was never going to happen and that we didn't see much of in the past. But every day now, it seems more and more frequently, people on the left are coming out and saying, no, we don't want to just ban AR-15s or any of these other so-called assault rifles. We want to take all guns away from all Americans, and we're going to do it too. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your Right Angle episode on how Pajama Boy is going to storm the shooting range and confiscate everybody's guns armed with only a bottle of warm chia tea, as Scott so memorably said in our pregame show. This is not another episode about gun rights or gun control so much as this particular dynamic. So, Scott, let's start with you. A bunch of stick-arm progressive weenies who are afraid of paring knives want the American people disarmed, and now they're saying they're going to do it personally. What's wrong with this idea? Because it seems to me that there's a missing link in the chain of argument. Just to elaborate, as we said in our pre-game show, Scott and I were discussing this progressivism and the idea that progressives succeed because they make 70% of the argument. We want this is bad, we want this, we should do this, end of the discussion. So how are these progressive professors and magazine editors and school teachers and so on going to go out and disarm the American people?
Oddly enough, I think that they, more than maybe anybody else in society, have the capability to pull this off. And that is because they have thrust their tentacles so deeply into the government and to the culture that they do have the power to manipulate government into taking away our rights in various ways. And they have demonstrated that over the years. Now, obviously, there are some among us who are armed who would feel like we had to mount an adequate defense of our freedoms. But my suspicion is the vast majority of decent, law-abiding American citizens don't flout the law, even if the law seems to be in violation of the Constitution. The way that these liberal weenies, as you call them, count on being able to do this is by superior firepower. They count on being able to do this the way every military battle is, or at least every competent commander plans to win, is by overwhelming force. And they believe that that overwhelming force and firepower is going to be under their control. They will have the weaponry to be able to take away our weaponry because they will control the government. And that is rule by force. And I think it's totally reasonable for them to assume that they're going to be able to do this. And only if the rest of us kind of wake up from our slumber and make sure that we protect at every turn our right to keep and bear arms, will we be able to resist this onslaught.
Well, this is the issue, isn't it? Steve, I saw something. The problem, as I've said so many times, the problem with the internet is you get so much information so fast you don't get a chance often to remember where you saw something and correctly attribute something that deserves attribution. But I did see a tweet that basically says, I'll give up my weapons when people like you stop telling me what to do with my property. And therein hangs a tale, right? Yeah. So basically, what these people are saying is, because of the number of school shootings, we are now going to authorize, as Scott said, law enforcement or the military, if necessary, to kill tens of thousands of law-abiding citizens, if not hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions, in order to prevent violence in America. This is a hole in the theory, and since we got you here, I'll add another one for you to address. The racism of these people really, really is shocking to me, because these white, no, I'm serious as I can be.
I'm laughing because I know where you're going.
These white progressives are on fire now about taking away guns because white children are being murdered in schools. But in a really typical month, in just Chicago alone, 60 black people murdered on any given month in Chicago, the same as the number of shooters, one more in Chicago during the month of the of the Las Vegas shooting. He got 59 people, 60 people murdered in Chicago during that same month. So why is it that these white racists are so alarmed now about taking away guns when, for example, 8,000 black people are murdered by handguns in inner cities every year in this country. And it doesn't seem to me that the crusade that they have in mind is going to begin there, with them marching into West Baltimore or South Central LA or South side of Chicago and having the progressive teachers unions go in there and disarm those people who are actually being murdered at the particularly highest rates.
Well, Bill, you made such a great point, and I think it was in Scott's segment earlier this week, you mentioned a scene in Godfather 2. You just made me think of a scene in Godfather 1. The 5 families of New York have gotten together because they're trying to make peace. They've gone to the mattresses. People are getting killed left and right. And the peace has to resolve on Vito Corleone agreeing to use the judges that are in his pocket to protect the drug trade that the other 5 families are just starting to get into. And Don Corleone doesn't believe in the drug trade. He thinks it's going to get too much government attention. It doesn't matter how many judges he owns. The government is going to shut them down. And one of the other heads of one of the other families says, yeah, we have to keep it away from schools. We'll sell it to the coloreds. They're animals anyway. And that is the exact same attitude from the progressive left with gun violence. They don't mind going to Plano, Texas, as you said earlier this week, to disarm a bunch of white hicks, but they have had control of Chicago for decades, uninterrupted 80 years, uninterrupted, total control of Chicago, and it is a carnage house down there of black on black violence, and they don't give a damn because they're just a new form of the mafia who thinks that the coloreds are animals, and we'll just let them kill each other, whether it's with drugs or whether it's with firearms. But let me finish with one last thing. I saw this in the comments section earlier this week, I think on Instaplanet. It might have been on Hot Mic. And I can't remember if it was a meme or just something that somebody wrote. If it wasn't a meme, maybe one of our viewers can turn this into something that looks sharp, a lot better than my meager skills. It said, when you pry the AR-15 out of my cold, dead hands, don't grab it by the barrel shroud because it'll still be hot.
That's kind of epic, actually.
Isn't that great? I fell in love with that, and I had to share it with you.
Well, needless to say, just as a quick overview, I've many times have discussed the idea that if 6 million Jews in Germany had been armed against 30 or 40,000 Totenkopf Waffen-SS, not Waffen-SS, regular SS murderers, there were 30,000 murderers and 6 million victims, and that works when the murderers have the guns and the victims don't. When you've got 100 million, 200 million armed American civilians and perhaps 3 million people working for the government at any given time, those numbers don't look good for these progressives that are trumpeting all this about. But it's a bigger issue than this on 2 levels, I think. First of all, they're basically saying, screw the Second Amendment. We don't care anymore, we're just going to do it. This is the problem, isn't it, really? The problem is, to hell with the law and to hell with what the law says, to hell with rights and so on. We know we don't have the political capital to overturn the Second Amendment, and since we don't like the law, we're going to simply disregard the law. We're going to do what we want to do in order to achieve our political objective, no matter how lofty they may say it is. And to hell with the law. So you're the people that we're protecting ourselves against. You're the people who simply refuse to accept the results of elections you don't like. I'm speaking to the progressives now. You're the ones that like to change the rules to get your guy elected, change it back when a Republican is elected on the same rules, then change them again to get a progressive back. You're the people to whom power is everything and law is nothing except a means to control your adversaries out of their own sense of decency and respect for the rule of law. So we're not armed to protect ourselves against criminals or against communists or against Mao or against China or Russia. We're armed to protect ourselves against you magazine editors and university professors, because you're fascists, that's why. And the second issue, of course, is what we were talking about at the beginning with Scott and I were talking about let's make 70% of the argument. You say you're going to get rid of all guns in this country. You want to ban all guns. How's that going to work? Explain it to me. This is where every single progressive argument falls to the ground, is when you ask them to complete the final 30%. Describe to me how this will happen. Well, we're going to pass a law that's going to make owning guns illegal. Okay, then what? Well, then people will turn in their guns. Some law-abiding people will turn in their guns, but the law-abiding people are not the ones shooting up schools or massacring people in inner cities. So what happens next? Well, then we're going to have to go after people and take their guns. By force? Yes. So you're going to send the military in there to kill American citizens who have not committed any crimes prior to you making something that's guaranteed in the Constitution a crime. So how is that going to work? Are they going to go in there and just start murdering people who refuse to surrender their guns? Well, if that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do. I see. So you're not really trying to save lives or anything so much as you're trying to eliminate something that bothers you personally. Trying to eliminate something that is a bugbear for you. It's an issue for you. And the issue is very simple. The idea that there are people who are willing to defend themselves while you're not is intolerable to you. You don't have the physical or moral courage to be responsible for your own defense. And therefore, the presence of people who are responsible for this is repugnant to you. Makes you feel like a victim, makes you feel like there's something missing. And so you mean to take away the guns from the people, not who are committing the murders, but from the people who are actually determined to protect themselves and their families, because you don't have the courage to do it. And that's what's driving this. You don't realize that, of course, but I do. You don't have the courage for it. And so nobody should have the courage for it. If protecting yourself is a moral requirement, and you don't have the means, psychologically or emotionally, to be willing to protect yourself, then we have to make protecting yourself against the law. And then we'll all be equally cowards, won't we? That's really it. It really is when you get right down to it. That's what you're really going for. It's either that or outright racism because white kids are being killed and not black kids, because you haven't paid a damn bit of attention to that in these democratically controlled cities where the murder rate is out of control. It's 100 times what it is in heavily armed Plano, the murder rate in Chicago. 100 times that. But you won't go to Chicago and take away the people who are doing the killings guns there. You won't take away the handguns there or the knives there. You're going to try and take away AR-15 from law-abiding citizens in Plano because deep down inside, you are enough of a coward to know that the people who actually legally own guns in this country are not going to open fire on some protester standing on their yard. Try that in South Central Chicago, South Central LA. Try it on the south side of Chicago. Try it in West Baltimore. Try it any place else where crime is rampant. It's a lie. And it's told by cowards to justify their cowardice, and it's also told by these very same cowards who want control of their other people and will not be able to sleep at night until there is no resistance to their will. Any other questions I can help you with?
I'm good.
For everybody here at BillWhittle.com, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.